One Nation's been the only consistent political party for the last 20 years.
They're not talking about you. All right, well, let me tell you, One Nation is talking about you.
Looks like the media's run away from One Nation. They're too scared to ask us any questions, mainly because we're straight talkers and we've got the answers.
This is like a call to arms. You guys need to start making the real decisions and who you're going to vote for.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the ExCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp, and as always, I'm joined by Adam Zahra. How are you going tonight, Adam?
I'm pretty good, mate. How you going?
I'm very well, thank you. And tonight we are joined by Alistair Pope. He's a Lieutenant Colonel, wealth of experience behind him, ex-Lieutenant Colonel, and also a budding chess player with a few tournaments under his belt.
Budding chess player, I would say fairly well seasoned, expert chess player.
Yeah. Well, how are you tonight, Alistair?
Very good. And by the way, I've been budding chess player since 1962.
Wow, that's incredible.
I'll get there one day.
Can you just give us a bit of a brief introduction of who you are and some of the things that you've accomplished in all your years?
Okay. I was born in Scotland. I grew up in Glasgow. I have the knife wounds and the scars. It was a tough city, but it gave you a good attitude to life. And I got a good education there. I came to Australia when I was 18. My first job was I accepted a job in the outback, working about 60 miles out of Port Hedland. A little survey camp of 3 to 4 people at various times. And we were surveying roads. I spent 7 months there and came back and decided that was a lot of fun, but we'll take that box off. There were no girls out there, by the way, that I discovered. So I came back and unfortunately then got a job as an accountant. Now, I am entirely psychologically and physically unsuited to be an accountant. I hope you're not accountants.
No, I'm actually a surveyor.
Sorry?
I'm a surveyor.
Oh, you're a land surveyor?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was doing that in the outback.
Yeah, that would have been a hard job out in the...
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Just that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life out there. I came back and I worked for 18 months as an accountant, or working for an accountant, studying accountancy. And I think if I'd studied it for 20 years, I'd never have passed a single exam. It used to go in one ear and out the other because I just didn't have any interest in it. So I volunteered for national service. One of about 300 to 400 people who actually did that. And my logic was that I had to get out of accountancy, and this would give me an opportunity to save some money over the next 2 years. No intention of going to Vietnam or anything. And collect that money, and then the government would actually pay my uni fees for the first year. So that would get me through 1 year. And I'd figure out how to get through the next 2 years, whatever money I had. How's that for a plan? I got into the army and I met what I would call real people. No Bruce Willis's, no Arnold Schwarzenegger's, people who'd been there, done that. And I thought, this is for me. I was fortunately selected for officer training, which to this day I regard as the hardest thing I've done in my life to get through. Partially an attitude problem. Don't fight the system. But I did get through that and graduated in March 1967. By that stage, I had met real people, and I volunteered for Vietnam, as everyone did. Here's something that's not known. Everyone who went to Vietnam was actually a volunteer. And I used to train people going, and we'd draw the sort of line in the sand and said, if you don't want to go, step across the line. And you'd always get 1 or 2 would step across the line, which is fair enough. And then you would look at the 100 eyes of the people who had now said, I'll go, watching them. And you'd watch these people melt as they just let down all their mates. Yeah. And I used to give about a 10-minute speech and then tell them that you're going to be the dunny inspector for the next 2 years, and you're going off to be the steward in the officers' mess in Keswick Barracks in South Australia, so good luck with the rest of your life. So there was a great waiting list, and in fact, my national service ran out, and I still hadn't got a posting to Vietnam, so I signed on, and finally got to Vietnam in 1970, and I had a good job there. I didn't spend much time out in the bush. I had basically a job down in Vung Tau, which was a fairly safe area. That didn't really suit me. So in fact, I volunteered and was actually allocated to go to 2 Battalion and work for a fellow actually, the Barry, oh gosh, what's his second name? They wrote 2 books about him, one of which is called Tiger Man. And he was a real character and a real warrior. So spent some time there, and then at the end of my tour, came back to Australia, posted to Perth, and career just sort of went from there. I spent 6 months in Indonesia with what's called Operation Gading 3. And then I was posted to Papua New Guinea for 1 year, but ended up extending for 3 years because I found Papua New Guinea was just like Glasgow on a Saturday night. It was a rough place, and I rather enjoyed it. And I actually got married in Port Moresby at Cokie Market Church. And the lass that I married is still married to me today. So,
oh, well, congratulations.
Something went okay.
Something was
46 years. Yeah. The interesting thing is I actually met her in Vietnam in 1970. She's actually Vietnamese. And dated her twice. Managed to get her to come out with me twice, and then didn't see her for 5 years. And then wrote a letter when Vietnam was falling apart, and that letter got through. So she got out as a refugee. And then I made her an offer she couldn't refuse. You can come and join me, or you can go and live with my parents, or I'll just look after you. But I've now said I'd sort of pick up where I left off. So she came to Papua New Guinea, and we got married 9 months later. So that was 46 years ago. That's an unusual story. We spent 3 years in Papua New Guinea, and then I was posted to Townsville and various army postings. And then I had the worst posting of my life. They posted me to Canberra. Oh, we should ring fence the place and burn it down with everyone in it. If the building was in fire, someone would have said, "We've got to get a working party together to make decisions. In fact, we better get 5 working parties so nobody can make a decision." Yep. And I was entirely psychologically unsuited for that, going from command to committee. Anyway, I then went to Staff College, which was another intellectually hard year, mainly not through the challenge of what you were doing, but the sheer volume that they used to push onto you. They actually did try to sort of break the people there by the volume that would be put onto them. If you're going to break at Staff College, you're not going to be much good in the brigade headquarters or the divisional headquarters in the real war. So finished that, and then a couple of years later, I got promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and posted to Melbourne. And then I sort of asked for 3 things that would sort of interest me because my 20 years was coming up, and I didn't get any of them. So I decided it was time to get out, and the threat was that you're in the running for a posting to Canberra and promotion to Colonel, where we'll allow you to make tea and vickies for the generals. Again, something for which I was entirely psychologically unsuited. So I decided to get out and worked for a couple of companies and started my own business. In fact, this is the shirt of the business I ran. I had it for 18 years and worked in the oil and gas industry and in project management, and had a great time and visited 65 countries in 18 years. And mainly in oil projects, oil and gas projects, but it was a good life. And then I got out of the army, and got out of the army a long time then, but I retired basically about 2016 and started writing. I've written a lot of over 300 articles I've pointed out, and you've seen some of them.
Yep.
So I write for people like Quadrant Online, and a lot of the military history magazines in America. Strategy and Tactics, Modern War, World War II, Camaraderie. So that's what I spend my time doing now. We've sort of established that we don't need to my wife actually ran restaurants for 29 years and 7 months, 10,735 days, but who was counting?
Who was counting?
Yeah, the tough life, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
But she did that for 29 years. I was hoping she'd keep it for another 5 months just to click over the 30 years, but we had a good offer for one of them. Well, we're down to the last two. We had good offers for both, actually. So we just sold them off. And she's retired. Now she keeps saying to me, I wish I'd done it 10 years earlier. No. Yeah. So now we've got a condo in Vietnam, where we live for 6 months of the year. And then we've got a house back here, which I'm living in right now. So we alternate between the two. So that's my background.
Wow.
Achievements. Oh well, won the state championship and chess championship while in Vietnam, and won a seniors tournament after 35 years, and won many other tournaments along the way. But and now I've actually written a couple of chess books. And my brother's much stronger than I am, and he's just produced his book, but it's not really for commercial sale. He printed it off and gave it off to many of the people he's been beating over the years.
Do you find many similarities between chess and military?
It's it should be, because chess teaches you to think logically, but also within the capabilities. I mean, it's not the first time I've played a combination I thought was sound and someone's proved it's unsound. So it makes you look at all the options and then make a decision. In fact, I've got a game here now I've been looking at for 7 days. I still play chess by post. This game started, by the way, in May 2021.
Wow.
It should be finished by May 2023. Maybe. Could take longer.
But are you doing snail mail, not email?
Snail mail. The problem with email is I did try internet chess competitively and found it was full of lunatics. I would I'd get home from work and have a look at a game, spend a couple of hours looking at it and play the move. And I'd still be up at 2 in the morning looking at some other games, and ping, it would be back again. I was playing a Buddhist monk in Belgium who didn't seem to sleep ever. And, and your time starts again when this arrives. I just didn't have time to do any of this, to do all of this. So and the other thing is actually, in the snail mail, if you're honest, you don't use a computer. That's why I've been looking at this game for 7 days. If I whipped out my computer and actually plugged it in there, it would probably tell me what I should do. But I don't see the pleasure in saying my computer's stronger than yours, or I'm stronger than your computer. I'd rather actually win, lose, or draw based on my own merits. So I know at least one person I was playing was actually using the computer because he told me. So anyway, it's one of the reasons why the Correspondence Chess League used to have over 2,500 members. It's now got 211. Yep. It's down to about 10%, and that's because, and I think the age bracket is all probably in the late 50s or 60s now. We're not getting used. There's still a lot of kids playing chess, but they're not interested in playing either correspondence or on the internet in competitions.
It's funny that you talk about chess. Sorry, Alistair, but it's funny that you talk about chess because I've got 2 daughters. One's I've got 3, but one's 11 and one's 15, and all of us. And I remember when I was at school, chess popped up, and it was kind of like a hot thing for a little while, just like yo-yo and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny now that at the moment, all the kids are talking a little bit about chess. Well, this week, they've been talking about chess. So I pulled out my old chessboard and that I got from my dad, because Dad and I used to play a little bit of chess. Nothing like what you're playing, but we just had a bit of a knockabout on there. And it does slowly come around a little bit in cycles. And I said to my kids, I really want you to learn how to play chess, just because of what you were talking about a second ago. Like it makes you think logically, but but within parameters of how each piece can move. So
and what's actually achievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I just like the beauty of chess. I mean, some of the positions are absolutely outstanding. The thought processes of people to actually devise these. There's a particular problem, actually, and I just cannot conceive how this guy actually devised this chess problem. It is so complex. And so when you look at that, and plus, I've been actually writing this book out of CCLA positions, correspondence chess league positions. I'm going to put 200 of these real life positions into a book, and there are some very interesting people. You probably never heard of John Hammond, but he was a stockbroker in Sydney, very high up in the world, and yet he was a mad keen chess player. And Maurice Newman, who was the chairman of the ABC, was Australian Championship standard. And I think, I've got about 8 of his games in this, out of 200 in this book. He was such an extraordinary good player for combinations that so he's got quite a large. I think he's got the largest selection of games in the book. And I don't put in the whole games. I just put in the position, and then I actually here I won't show you, and then give the answers on the next page. So you don't need chessboards. You can actually study them on the page, decide what your moves are on the page, and there's the answer.
Okay.
And you can do that, from 200 pages of the book. So yeah, I've done the first 90. So nearly halfway there. I'll finish it by the end of January.
Wow.
Very good.
So we're talking about chess and capabilities. When we switch over to military and defence, what is your opinion of the modern Australian Defence Force, and what are our capabilities, and maybe what are some of the things that we should have more focus on in terms of capabilities with the current Defence Force?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd ask you is to have a large glass of whiskey handy, nothing sharp near you, and have a Mogadon or some sedative close by as well. Whiskey's probably the best one. This is a different army from the one I joined. When I joined, we were involved in Malaysia, we were involved in Borneo, we had a presence in Papua New Guinea, which was not fighting any wars, and we had a presence, of course, in Vietnam, a large one. We had over 50,000 people serve in Vietnam. And so we had quite a capability. But it all went wrong, actually. And I'd point out that quite often, armies are not defeated by other armies, they're defeated by peace. And that's basically what happened to us. In the early 1970s, someone decided to sit down and think up, well, what are we going to need in 15 years? There's no threat for 15 years, so that'll take us through until about 1990. So what are we going to do? So we actually invented an army called the Masurians. You probably haven't heard of them. They belong in an island, a large continent actually, sort of just north of Fiji, sort of the Atlantis of Fiji. And we armed them exactly like the Russians. Lots of heavy armor, lots of artillery. And so we then devised our army, our one division that we had, to actually defeat this Masurian army. When I went to Staff College in 1981, it dawned on me very quickly that we were preparing to fight the wrong war. The last time we had actually fought that sort of open battle was in the Middle East at El Alamein, or in Syria, or somewhere there. And when we withdrew from the Middle East and came back, we had a couple of divisions actually in Papua New Guinea, but they never fought as divisions. I mean, the terrain just didn't allow you, the resupply didn't allow you to do any of that. So I think the largest battles they were probably fought by about a battalion, or maybe followed up by a second battalion, but they were not fought as we had actually been preparing to fight. And of course, we sent tanks to Vietnam, but we couldn't send them anywhere else. And tanks were very useful in Vietnam. But now we haven't got out of that syndrome. And so what we're facing now is we've got an army that's totally unprepared for the next type of war. Now, there's a masterclass been going on for the last couple of years. And I was first alerted to it to a great extent when the Nagorno-Karabakh war took place, which naturally you both know about. Knew you wouldn't. That was when Azerbaijan and Armenia got in a bit of a stoush. And Azerbaijan, which is not exactly a leading edge country as far as military technology is going, completely decimated the Armenians. They killed over 5,000 of them, and they took out 550 tanks. They destroyed every artillery piece they had, and they did it with drones. And the Armenians had no counter to drones. They didn't even see. They did not realize the face of war had changed. And that alerted me to the fact that we'd better get some drones, and found that it's a policy of the Australian military and the federal government, was actually put in by a Labour minister at the time, that we would not have armed drones as they're an unfair weapon. Now, there was a lieutenant colonel, actually, a very highly decorated lieutenant colonel from the US Army, who gave up on America and actually came out to live in southern Queensland, or actually northern New South Wales, on the Tweed River there. And he actually used to write little things like, if you find yourself in a fair fight, you've got the wrong battle plan.
Yep.
Now, if you ever watch the Israelis, now they're always outnumbered, and yet they win every battle, and they take very few casualties. You have to fight an asymmetric type of war, because they can't afford, when you're outnumbered 33-1, to lose 100 men and kill 400 enemy. You're going to run out of men quite quickly. So the Nagorno-Karabakh was the first example of the new type of warfare. Then Ethiopia, which had been fighting a war for about 10 years now, had lost a lot of its territory to Tigray. Just not only recaptured Tigray, but was actually now advancing into Ethiopia. They recaptured the whole territory in 3 weeks. Drones. Just took out all the forward positions by things people couldn't see, couldn't hear, didn't know were there, and then hit them with armed drones. And this has been going on. The Yemenis have been using them against the Saudi Arabians. And they've actually taken out quite a few tanks. So there's a new weapon on the battlefield. Not the ultimate war-winning weapon, but let's take it, it's there. We don't have any. Now, you might have seen actually that we recently announced, just a couple of days ago, we announced this top secret submarine that we've got. It's not top secret, for goodness sake, but boy, you wouldn't be telling anyone about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
It's unarmed. It's a surveillance submarine called the Angula or something. I've got the articles on it here. But it's now, we're going to call it the Ghost Shark. We like this sneaky business where we can go up and look at things. We can't actually kill anyone. We don't want to hurt anyone. We have different attitudes from any army that I know of. We try not to hurt people or their feelings. Then you have the Ghost Back. We actually then built this thing, and it's actually had some test flights which went successfully. And the idea is that the Ghost Back will actually fly with the F-35s and go into, what do they say in Star Trek? Go to places where, that's what I was talking about there, the unmanned submarine. The Ghost Bat actually is going to fly with the F-35. The trouble is, it's only got a top speed of 750 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
Now, the last time I looked, the F-35 goes a lot faster. So either they're going to have to be circling around while this thing goes to the danger zone, or it's not going to be much help to them. And it's unarmed. So we've got this thing about not arming anything. We know the enemy fears cold steel, so we've got plenty of bayonets. We're not prepared for the next war. A fellow I know very well, it's in my senior class actually, Michael Darby. He's written a couple of books called Unchained Australia, and he's got quite a lot of people. I think actually Malcolm Roberts wrote one chapter for it, and I've written about 5 in the latest one. And the longest one, he asked me about defence. I ended up writing 41 pages of the defence. And I said, okay, identify your enemy. Who's the enemy? If you don't know who your enemy is, we end up with the Masorians. We end up with a place called Orangeland, which doesn't exist. And we end up building an army to fight something that doesn't exist and we'll never fight. So, who's the enemy? Let me guess. I'll say China.
China. I was going to say China, right?
No, I'm allowed to say China. They're the most likely enemy at this point. The catch is that we can't fight the Chinese by standing in front of the spear point and sort of beating them down as they used to do in the old Macedonian days with Alexander and so on. They were just overwhelmed us by sheer weight of numbers. But I said there's now things like technology can overcome sheer weight of numbers. And if you look at the asymmetric war that's being fought in Ukraine, the Ukrainians have been doing rather well. And they've actually taken out about 40% of the operational tanks that Russia had. Now, the Russia's got a lot more tanks. And we don't have all our tanks running at the one time. So they're in the same position. They've got a lot in storage, which they might not get out, and the workshop will charge them up again, and they'll be sent off to the battlefield. But they lost about 40%. In fact, I have the numbers here. They lost about 900 tanks. Don't forget, we've got 78. So
that's all we've got.
Work that out. They lost them in 4 months. So we've got roughly 16 hours supply of tanks. And they'll be taken out by drones. So we've got to fight an asymmetric war. Now, everyone's talking about submarines. Submarines were the big thing. I wrote 3 articles in Quadrant about the cane toad, as I called it. Firstly, it was a unicorn. The Barracuda was never going to be floated. You can't take a nuclear submarine, rip the power plant out of it, and put a diesel power into it and think you got the same sub. Everything goes wrong if you try to do that. It'll probably be sitting in the water like a canoe. The weight proportion will be all wrong and everything else. Anyway, whatever happens there, it was never going to happen. So I ended up writing 3 articles on that, and I ended up calling it the cane toad, HMAS cane toad, because it was toxic. It was dangerous for anyone who sailed in it. It was probably a one-way voyage once.
Yeah.
The problem with conventional submarines is that they are quieter than when they were running on batteries, but they've got to pop up every 7 to 14 days to recharge the air supply and recharge the batteries. And the batteries take some time. In fact, that's one of the Unstoppable cane toad submarine. Yeah. I do come up with good titles, if nothing else. There's 3 articles in there that basically. Now, Robert Godliebsen got onto that. Now, he actually he was given one of my articles, and he read it, and we had a bit of a chat about it. And he did the right thing. He went for his strength, which is finance. And he looked at the economics of this submarine. And either A, B, or C had lied to Parliament, or they all had. It wasn't a case of, because they all gave different figures to the various committees in Parliament. And of course, one of the guys who was on the committee was an ex-submariner. So he knew a lot about this. And he's now questioning the admirals, the rear admirals that used to be his boss. And they all gave different answers. And in fact, it ended up costing the job of one of the defense ministers. I've forgotten her name now. But he basically just about had a breakdown at this point. So we've ended up with no submarine at all. So now, let's have a thought bubble. What will we have next? Let's have a nuclear-powered submarine, which will either be American or British, or a combination of both. Now, DMO loves this sort of stuff. We can now have an 8-year committee looking at whether or not we have one or the other, or a combination of both. And we can then go on and then we can modify it. The modifications will double the time it takes to get it, if we ever get it. In fact, we're not going to get it.
That's what I was going to say, Alistair. Sorry, Alistair. I'll remember your spot. But the more they have a committee, the longer it takes for us to actually get what we really need to kind of like defend our country. Is that's what you're getting to there? Isn't it?
No. It's actually designed that way. When I went to Log Command in Melbourne in 1984, a document came across my desk which needed 17 signatures, and at that stage it had 15, including my predecessor had actually signed it, but we were the sort of custodian of this document, 2 signatures to go. And I noticed that one of the signatures there was about 3 years old. So it wasn't a case of giving everyone the document. We used to hand it out sequentially. And then if there was something changed, it would go back to the beginning again. So this thing would be crawling through the system. But now, like I was new to the job, someone else was new to his job. So he actually popped up and said, I want to review that document and see if my department still wants to sign off. So we were able to add further delays. and not have it at all. Now, this is actually this is why I mentioned to you that I was entirely unsuited psychologically somewhere where you go and say, okay, we got 30% of the information, but we have to make a decision. Do we go or not, based on what we've got? These guys would say if we don't have 120% of the information, then we don't go. And so consequently, everything is overpriced, over time, underspecified or overspecified, and modified. And the modifications are wonderful because that's where you can actually bury the thing for years on end. Your favorite series has got to be Yes, Prime Minister, because that demonstrates you exactly how these people operate. And I don't know how to wake up in the morning and go to work and say, what decisions won't I make today?
Won't I make today?
Yeah. What will I stuff up today? Now, the other great thing, of course, is modifications. Now, you might have heard of the Hunter class anti-submarine warfare vessels, the frigates. We're going to build about 6 or 8 of them. They're being built by BAE, and they're being built to specifications which we kept modifying in Australia. So the timeline goes out and the price goes up. These will be the most expensive destroyers. They're not going to be frigates anymore. We've made so many modifications to them. It's like you used to fight in the flyweight class. Well, now you're a bantamweight. You were in the what's the next one up from down from heavyweight? You were in the welterweight class, but now you're so heavy you're in welterweight. We are actually producing destroyers, and there was a classic which I did see. I mean, if I had a pillow, I'd have suffocated myself. There was one of the senators actually asked the admiral, "Well, if you've added an extra 30 tons to this thing, and it's now overweight, it's now sitting low in the water, and you've still got the same power pack, how fast can it go?" And they said, "We'll have to wait and see."
Oh,
So we don't have any marine engineers who can calculate how fast it will go with the same power pack and sitting deeper in the water that's carrying an extra 30 tons. That is just, I don't know. I mean, I think he just gave that as a throwaway answer, knowing senators are too dull to actually be able to work out what he's just said and how ridiculous it is. So when you're
sorry, what you're talking about now? So is this current things that are being meant to be being built for our military, for our navy?
Yeah. The Hunter has been on the go for 5 or 8 years already, and it's not exactly hit the skids on the launching yet. We need a few modifications here, but it gets better.
Won't they be out of date by the time they're built and put in and floated?
Yeah, probably, but we'll do upgrades. I mean, our LHDs, the landing helicopter dock, is missing one small piece. It's got no helicopters. You probably think that's a problem, but if you watch one of the skits on British television there, where the guy saying to the admiral, he said, "Well, we've now built the Queen Elizabeth, and it's a huge aircraft carrier, but it's got no planes." And I said, "Well, it was a case of we made all the other modifications that we wanted, or we had planes, and we couldn't do both." And unfortunately, this, of course, was true. And when Elizabeth did its sail around the South China Sea and everywhere else around the world tour, it was actually carrying Americans with F-35s. It did have some British ones too, but once we got back here, because we took them all off again, we needed them for other things.
Oh,
so it gets better with the frigates. Because I went along to a presentation put on by BAE, which was unfortunately full of ex-Navy people. And so there was lots of oohs and ahs. Ooh, wonderful, we're going to have a boat in the water soon. So I waited until the end, and I asked the question. I said, this is an anti-submarine warfare frigate. Can it find the Barracuda and sink it? Silence.
They can't do it.
And he thought about this and he said, "Yes, of course we can find the Barracuda and sink it." Then he just sunk the Barracuda. If he says, "No, we can't find it, it's a really stealthy submarine," then he's just sunk his own project. So he gave the only possible answer and he said, "I don't know." And I said, well, if we don't know, we can actually kill one of these two projects, can't we? The temperature in the room dropped below freezing. If they'd had any wood nearby, I would have been burnt at the stake by the Navy guys who all want to talk about, the good things that happen in the Navy, whatever that is. But anyway, I stayed around and ate the half-eaten. I always made sure I was eating a half-eaten sandwich that someone else had tasted first in case they poisoned me.
Yeah.
But I did have many people come up and say, interesting question. So we've actually got a submarine we can't find, or we can find, or we got a mine hunter, we got a submarine hunter that can't find submarines. Which is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the state of a lot of it. And people are not asking the right sort of questions like that. But there's a beauty of a thing called the Hawkeye, or Hawkeye, Huakei, which is the Special Forces vehicle. Now, you take a normal sort of vehicle and you put some armour on it. Obviously, you've got to outgun the engine there and put some weapons on it. And you've seen these pictures of a long-range desert group with David Sterling and these guys running around the deserts of North Africa. This is basically what it does. And in fact, it was going to be used by the SAS in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. So it should be good. They've taken, I think, about 8 years to build it, and the SAS, of course, have totally, and so have the commanders, utterly rejected it for the number of flaws it's got on it. And each one costs $2.43 million. We should just have gone out and bought them Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
And they could have driven them around the streets of Perth and picked up lots of girls. But so here we spent all this time modifying and adding to it, and I have a picture of it actually, but it's absolutely classic. The things that got wrong. They decided actually that they've seen too many movies where one of these gets blown up, and in the American movies, of course, everyone gets blown out of the vehicle, rolls over, shakes himself down, and goes back to the fight. So it has no protection. You're actually exposed to the elements. You're either going to get sunburnt or hypothermia, one or the other, or wet. Then, of course, they've actually mounted a gun on top, which is not protected. So the plural gunner has got no protection whatsoever. And as he turns around, because the enemy is on the right-hand side, he turns around and fires at him, and the hot cartridges then fall on the driver. Keep your eyes on the road. Stop doing that. And that's just one of many things. It's so overweight. It can't do many of the things it was designed to do. It ranges down, can't climb hills. Which brings me to the Boxer. The Boxer is our latest vehicle. By the way, we did build the Bushmaster, and the Bushmaster was an excellent vehicle. In fact, we should have retained them much longer than we have. We're now going to replace them. But the Bushmaster took a long time. They're actually driven by the infantry because armour wouldn't drive them because they have wheels. This is sort of, real men drive tracks. So the infantry actually drive the Bushmasters. Now, when you actually got the Boxer, it was pointed out we'd added extra armour, we'd added extra things to it, and it now can't go up a 60-degree slope. The engine's not powerful enough. So we're going to replace this guy. We've got 450 of them, that's the order. I think they'll bring it down to 350 to stay under budget. But what they're going to do is replace the engines on 100 of them. And the contract is let to an Australian company to actually upgrade these engines. So every time we make these modifications, we don't think through the implications of what we've just done. Now, you might have seen our patrol boats. I'll get off equipment in a minute.
I love it. I love the tech. I love the tech talk. I love it. But it's very disheartening though, because we think we're safe, but it sounds like that we've basically got nothing in the kitty, nothing in the arsenal, and anything that is coming is going to be no good anyway.
Well, the good thing is we've got about 24 patrol boats. When the Navy actually gives its numbers, it gives, we've got 6 Collins-class submarines. We don't have crews for 6 submarines. We've only got crews for 3. Then we've got all these we've got helicopter docks, the largest ship in the fleet, 24,000 tons. Looks a bit puny beside the Ronald Reagan, which is 120,000 tons. But then again, this is the biggest we got, but it doesn't have helicopters. But now we've got these patrol boats, which have to be. It had a 40mm gun on it. A 40mm is not that big, but it does carry a fair punch. You have to hit, say, a fishing boat with a guy with a shotgun on it. But we've actually changed the weapon on that from a 40mm gun to a 25mm because it was now overweight. And it was if you do a sharp turn, you're liable to roll over and find yourself upside down. So they're taking the 40mm gun off it and put the 25mm on instead. So
almost half the size of the bullet. Almost half the size of the cartridge. That's what millimeters means, right?
Yeah. Well, the other one was actually a shell. It's actually a small shell. I mean, we've got even the infantry carry a 40mm grenade, which you can fire out of a weapon. But we've now reduced that to 25mm. So what we've now got is these highly dangerous patrol boats with a 25mm pop gun on it. So who are they dangerous to? Well, basically those that sail on them in case they come up with someone who's got a 40mm gun on board or something bigger. I mean, we have a defenseless force, and I don't know what these people are thinking. There seems to be no coordination and no thinking through what they're actually trying to achieve and what their role is. So when you have people saying, I don't know how fast it will go, I mean, it's supposed to have a speed of 31 knots, but now it's heavier. It's probably around about 27, 28 knots maximum, which means if the LHD is cruising away at top speed, you're waving bye-bye to it, because you can't keep up.
Alistair, you were speaking about drones before.
Yes.
Just to shift to the Air Force now, which we haven't really touched on.
But wait a second, I've got one question about the submarines. But
right,
can I ask the question about submarines first?
Yep.
All right. So I have a very good constituent of mine because I'm still running in candidates and all that kind of stuff. So the name the ExCandidates is a bit misleading, but it's what we got, so that's what we use. But what I was going to say is he was also a submariner, and he said he prefers one of my constituents.
Oh, okay.
So he was an engineer, submariner, and all that kind of stuff. Really great guy, actually. Anyway, he said that when he used to do his training, he used to be able to sink nuclear subs all the time with diesel subs.
Yes.
And his main point was saying that a diesel sub can run silent, whereas a nuclear sub can't run silent because they have to keep the cooling systems on for the reactor.
Correct.
So
I did say they were quieter.
Yeah.
There are two problems. The battery-driven submarine has only got a top speed. I think it's around 12, or you can look it up. Look up the Collins class; it'll actually tell you. But it's got a top speed of about 12 knots. A nuclear submarine chugging around there has got an underwater speed of about 30 knots.
All right.
Basically, unless you've got a long lead on your torpedo and you get close enough, you're not going to be able to hit it. By the way, they've got protection as soon as they detect an incoming submarine. Watch things like the Hunt for Red October. It's not a bad movie, actually.
Yeah, I like that movie.
But the point there is, yes, diesel submarines have a literal, meaning not literal, LITTORAL function if you're in a country. Now, for instance, the Israelis have built a submarine called the Dolphin, which they actually use in the Red Sea. Now, the Red Sea is fairly narrow. It has got some deep parts, but the water's very clear. And so they actually would have to go down almost beyond the bottom to get away. So they can only basically operate at night. But these small subs are designed for landing special forces, going and surveilling something on the other side, perhaps mine laying. So that there is a function for them. But our main base actually is in Perth, Fremantle, so we can actually refuel at Exmouth. There's a big problem with Exmouth, actually. The Greenies are up in arms because we store oil there, or diesel. What happens if there's a leak the planet will die. All the reefs up there will die. The fish will die. So they're trying to actually stop them refueling there. They don't refuel there. They've got a range of about 6,000 kilometers. You go from there and you submerge roughly about Christmas Island, and then you submerge all the way and you get up there. You got to snorkel along the way. I mean, there's no way out of that. And snorkels can be detected. By the way, the leaders of this sort of technology who actually invented the snorkel so the submarines didn't have to surface were the Germans. In the last 30 months of the war, how many submarines did the Germans lose? 30 months only.
In the last part of the war?
Is that the U-boats?
They lost all of them.
Yeah, the U-boats. Yeah. Sorry?
Didn't the Allies kind of wake up to their techniques and kind of stop the U-boats?
Yep. How many did they lose in the last 30 months?
Well, they probably lost all of them.
We've got 6, remember?
We've got 6.
Yeah, we got 6 boats. We've only cruised for 3, but anyway. How many did the Germans lose in the last 30 months? 634. Divide that back by 30, we were losing a U-boat every 2 days.
Wow.
Well, two U-boats every 3 days for 30 months with the crews. So 40 men. This is why when you see, if you read the book Iron Coffins, it points out that 30,000 sailors out of the 40,000 who sailed in U-boats did not return many from the first journey. And yeah, we're planning to have a conventional U-boat sometime around 2040 to 2045, or maybe a nuclear-powered one. We're not going to have nuclear weapons. We're only going to power it with nuclear, which means it can go faster and stay down longer, and it can go deeper. But we're not thinking through how we're going to fight the next war. How are we going to take on someone with maybe 2 nuclear-powered submarines in 20 years' time? Oh, by the way, I believe we have asked the Chinese to hold off until we're ready.
This is the scariest part, Alistair, is that, I guess we all, like the people of Australia, I'm just an average guy, just kind of think, oh yeah, we're all right, and there are no dramas. You have China slowly encroaching, reclaiming land in the northern part of our area of the ocean, where they're reclaiming land and where they chaffed one of our planes recently, not too long ago, within 6 months. And then you've got them slowly coming around our sides, flanking us. And, and we've basically got nothing, is what you're trying to say. We've got three submarines.
We've got 3 submarines, 65 operational tanks that on a good day. We have about 300 available M113s, which we first bought in 1960. They're still operational because we haven't got the other things. We've got the Bushmaster, which is excellent. We've got the Boxer, which could be excellent once we've sort of got the engines right on it. The Navy has simply not got the assets it needs. It doesn't even know what it needs. I mean, it's talking about submarines, it's talking about submarine hunters, and it doesn't know if one can find the other who would win the battle between the two. If they do know the answer to that, they're not going to talk about it. So maybe that's what should be top secret. And then coming back to your the F-35. Now, the F-35, believe it or not, is not a good plane.
No, it's not.
It's far too expensive. In fact, I doubt if we can actually risk putting them up anywhere near the danger zone and losing one. The good thing about being a pilot...
The one thing I wanted to cut in about is now they're talking about stealth bombers. And they're talking about the B-21, which is this one here.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the B-21? $30 billion.
Per plane.
Yeah, just for one of them. And you got to... There's a thing called stealth and there's stealth. Stealth means at the normal radar transmissions that we use, you can't find it. And that's why it's coded like that. But if you use a different radar on a different frequency, you can find it. It's just as visible at different frequencies. And so one of the problems is stealth is not really stealth. There are a couple of ways around that. using jamming electronics, but that just gives away the fact you're in the area anyway. But the AWACS planes actually tend to jam all the enemy radars and missile sites, and that's what they did. Now, what the Azerbaijanis did was actually quite clever. They used to fly old planes with expendable pilots in it, and they would fly into the area. So the Armenians would then switch on all the radars and get their missiles, ready to take these guys out. And now they knew where they were. That's when the missiles and the drones would arrive and take out the Armenians. So for the loss of perhaps one or two pilots, they would take out, and by the way, they didn't always hit them, because what they were using was propeller-driven aircraft, which are very hard for high-speed missiles to actually find because they're heat-seeking. Now, there's not much heat coming off these things. They're looking for the tailpipe of the plane that they're looking for. There's no tailpipe. So these guys actually they lost the whole anti-aircraft defense system, and then of course the Azerbaijanis were able to fly over Armenian territory and bomb the crap out of them. So the F-35, the good thing about being an F-35 pilot is that you will get an airfield named after you after your first flight and when you don't come back. It's a regular thing. If you have a look at some of the airfields around Australia and in the islands, they're all named after pilots that didn't quite make it to the end of the war. So the problem is they're too expensive, they're too complex, we can't keep the rotten things in the air very long, and we need American support to do so.
And you can't fly them without the electronics. If the electronics go down in them, you crash them. They're too complicated. Is that what you mean by complex?
That's true, actually. In fact, I don't know if it's still the same now, but one of the things is before you could take off, you had to log into the system, which contacted I think it's Lockheed Martin or something, so it could actually monitor the health of your plane. Now, as soon as you make transmissions, everybody knows what you're doing.
Yeah, you will. Come on. Because what the F-35 replaced F-18? There was the one before. It's meant to be. They were always saying that the one that it's replaced was meant to be a better plane overall.
It was. It was better. I think it was more fit for purpose. In fact, they're even talking about there've been a number of cases there where. There have been a number of cases actually in the United States where various senators, Robert Kennedy is one of them, who's saying, why aren't we building F-22s again?
Right.
Well, it so happens that the F-22s were being built in the wrong states. They're being built in Republican states. And so the Democrats won't rebuild these, even though they're a better plane and would be incredibly useful. And the better dogfighters than the F-35 will be. Is an Air Vice Marshal did tell me, actually, he said there's only three problems with the F-35. They can't turn, they can't outfly the enemies, and they're blind to actually what's going on around them. They can be blinded to what's going on around them. Apart from those three things, they're bloody great aircraft. Travel for holiday travel or something.
And they look really good. I mean, they're a sexy looking plane, and that's really about it. I mean, if you want to scare maybe your enemy without actually having any sort of your bark is worse than your bite, maybe. But I
don't think they'll look good. I think they'll look like a fat pig, and that's why they can't turn, because then if you go to afterburners, your range drops dramatically. Yeah. So that we've got to take the problem between Truscott Air Base, which is a base in Western Australia, and where they're currently based or can be based in Northern Territory. They can't make it. They need to be refueled to get from one base to the other. There are no bases in between. So they can go halfway out and then they've got to turn back because they're going to run out of fuel. If you hit the afterburners, of course, that drops the range again tremendously because they're really chewing up fuel. So we should have something different, but I'm not sure what it is. I looked at a couple of other planes, including the Swedish one and others that, and in fact, a friend of mine, David Archibald, actually wrote a book about why we should have the other one. I forgot the name, on the shelf behind me. And he put down all the details as to its maneuverability, its weapons. Oh, that's the other thing too, of course. The F-35 can hardly carry any weapons. We're going to have to use them to ram the enemy.
Because they're all internal, right? That's to keep them as stealthy as possible.
Correct.
But I thought they had to run. I thought they also had to have planes fly before them to jam signal as well to help them be more.
Well, they do. That's what the Ghost Bat is designed to do now. They're going to put this out here saying, we're coming. All your radars are going down. Everything's going down. So somebody will be out there with binoculars actually looking for them. I mean, the nature of war has changed, and you really have to think through how you're going to fight this. There was a great cartoon many years ago I saw where there's a guy in armour and he's got a lance and a sword and he's about to go on his horse. And the guy's got a machine gun there and he said, I have no time for this now. I've got a battle to fight. Whereas, of course, the machine gun was something that did change the face of war quite considerably. The self-loading carbine rifle changed the face of war, but it didn't. And that's why you had these mass infantry attacks of people storming across battlefields and being cut down in the thousands. Look at the Somme on day one. 20,000 people dead, 37,000 wounded, one day.
Yeah. From machine guns.
Sorry? Machine guns.
From the machine guns, yeah.
Yeah. Because they were packed together and they were told that because we'd fired 3 million shots, 3 million artillery rounds at the enemy, they'd either be stunned or dead or have run away. None of that was true. The Germans had built very powerful defensive fortifications well underground and were actually quite safe. So, of course, they popped out immediately. Have a look at the Battle of the Neck, where we lifted the barrage 7 minutes too early, filmed Gallipoli, and all these people get up and storm, and 346 of them died. Not good.
Yeah.
And when the first wave was massacred within 10 meters of leaving the trenches, the second wave was told to go anyway. And they perhaps got to 12 meters. And some of the third wave, they were not told not to go. Some of the third waves get up in charts anyway, were killed.
And they were holding their guns to them.
Sorry?
As well. Weren't the officers in charge were holding guns to them to make them run anyway, weren't they?
No.
No, that didn't happen?
No.
That's Hollywood dramification?
Yeah, and in the film there's British officers drinking tea. In fact, it was I've written about this quite extensively, it was entirely an Australian disaster. And by the way, the guy who organised that disaster went on to be a full Major General and a Corps Commander, and was then given lots of awards, for his services. And yet, I mean, if he wasn't psychopathic, he should have been.
That was like a participation award, isn't it? You know, you've done a terrible job, but you still get rewarded for it.
Yes, of course. We're now talking about our current head of the ADF, aren't we?
Sorry, what was that?
We're now talking about Mr. Campbell.
Oh.
Now, one of the things there is, of course, he has a medal called a Conspicuous Service Cross. And I've read the citation to it, and it was for leadership in action. He has never been in action. In fact, he got the award when he was living in Abu Dhabi.
Sure.
And as far as I know, that's not a suburb of Kabul or anywhere near Afghanistan.
No.
And he's now demanding the commanders give up their conspicuous unit citation because apparently 39 of them might have been involved, or might have been 39 war crimes that involves 39 people. Let me point out to you. Quick question from your history, your knowledge. How many wars has Australia been involved in since 1845? We won't count the Aboriginal wars. Okay,
It'd be definitely more than 10 to 20, I would say.
It's 15.
Okay.
The first one we sent a contingent to was the Maori Wars of 1845 to 66, and that was just a bribery. Come and fight the war, kill the Maoris, and you can take the land. Now, that didn't work out very well. 1865 to 66, 66 was 2 years. 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 66 was But anyway, that was the first war we went to. Nobody was convicted of any war crimes at that war. We went to the Boer War. We had 2 Australians. Actually, one was Australian, that was Hancock. The other was actually British, and that was Breaker Moran, who was actually born in England. And both were executed for war crimes while serving with a British unit, as they should have been. I mean, they murdered prisoners. They got one minister of religion to dig his own grave and then shot him. I mean, I have no sympathy for Breaker Moran or Hancock. Now, so that's Boer War 2. And they're not actually Australians at the time, they're fighting the British, and they're actually convicted by a British court. Then we get the World War I, no war crimes. World War II, no war crimes. Korea, no war crimes. Borneo, none. Malaysia, none. Vietnam, none. Iraq, none. Afghanistan, welly. Here's where we sent all the really bad guys. And it's the only place where we've had war crimes. Now, if you can believe that, don't forget nearly 1 million men and women served overseas in operational zones between 1845 and today, 2022. And only in Afghanistan did we have 39 possible war crimes. Believe that?
No, that doesn't make sense.
It's not credible. The odds against that. And by the way, I mean, it's dead easy to find out all the people who did commit war crimes. In fact, I've quoted one. It's in a book about the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. And a Japanese pilot crashed his plane into the sea and swam to an island where he was met by some natives who took him down and handed over to Australians, who shot him in the head and buried him. He's a uniformed officer who had not committed any provable crime, and yet he was murdered. I said, we've got to track these people down, take away their medals, destroy the memory of their families. Now, that's just one. I mean, there's dozens of others that I could actually quote where these are known. I call it a war crime. We either take a civilian who you have no means of proving they've done anything particularly wrong, or you take a uniformed person and you shot them. Now, Albert Jacka, who's one of my heroes in life, raided an enemy trench and actually killed a number of Germans and captured 9 of them, 5 of whom were wounded. He was about to take them back when a counterattack came in. And he said, I had no choice but to shoot them because I couldn't look after them and also fight off the counterattack. So he shot 9 people, including 4 wounded, and killed them. Right? War crime? So, and he's of course a VC winner and one of our real heroes. But that's war. So when you look at Afghanistan and the people who actually are the witnesses to these so-called war crimes, you've got to ask yourself, what is the army thinking to even pursue this? The Brown Report has quoted an academic from Monash University, and she actually said there were cases where the SAS would raid a village and the men and boys would be taken away, and 3 days later, when they left, all the men would be found with their throat slit. Now, if you can find that village, I'd be very interested to ask the Taliban if I could visit it. So I know actually what happened. The SAS decided to take a Lendover, as we call it, and just made up stories and thought this was a great joke. But she took them down as being factual, and Brereton believed them, and it's in the Brereton report that the SAS massacred all the men in particular villages. And then, of course, there's the book No Front Line, written by that journalist, Chris Masters. And there's a particular line, I actually wrote a thing for Quadrant on this, book review of No Front Line. He said, at parties, people heard stories of bodies being found in fields without weapons, and much worse. What? This is the evidence he presents that a war crime had been committed. Someone said something at a party about a body being found in the field and it didn't have a weapon. And that's somehow related to a war crime. And that's the evidence that we're going on here for these people who are having their lives ruined. There's a member of Parliament now called Keith Wallahan. Should get him on one day. He's a lawyer, but he defended the commandos who were being charged, and I've written about this particular case too, who were being charged for the collateral damage. Now, the guy shooting at them, and they said they call out to them, surrender. Instead, it's another burst of machine gun at them. So they threw a couple of grenades in, and they killed 3 children that they didn't know were there. And so the Julia Gillard's Emily's Lister, who is now made up to a brigadier, they decided to prosecute these people for committing war crimes. Now, that's called collateral damage. And if you want to talk about collateral damage, what about the 50,000 people who died in Dresden, all of them civilians?
Yeah.
When Churchill ordered the firebombing of Dresden as a final act in the war in February 1945, when there was no real purpose for it, except to sort of demonstrate to the Germans that not only you've beaten, but I'm going to beat you into the ground.
Yeah.
Now, there are endless. War itself is a crime, and for people to then turn around and say, I heard a rumour of someone in the field, without a weapon being found dead. So what? Oh, well, I'm rather hoping that Ben Roberts-Smith wins his case and becomes the owner of a radio station or a TV station, or whatever he gets out of it, or even a newspaper.
So what do you think is the agenda behind all this then?
Sorry?
What do you think the agenda is behind all of this?
Destroy the ADF and its morale. I mean, we now support. I mean, there was a picture of some Navy clown with his little finger with pink nail polish on it. We actually discharged 7 lieutenant colonels who refused to put the LGBT QWERTY badge on the bottom of the signature block, and they were assessed by one of the big 4 companies that were asked to assess their attitude. And these guys were warriors. They said, I don't give a shit, about whether or not the guy's queer or what, as long as he fights.
As long as he can fight.
Bad attitude, not supported. And so these guys were discharged.
So they're actually actively getting rid of soldiers, military, because they're not willing to buy into this LGBTQI stuff. QWERTY.
One thing I heard you on another podcast, Alistair, you were saying that, and I might be getting this wrong, but just confirm if it's correct or not, that someone in the military was saying that climate change is the biggest threat to...
Oh, yes. Yeah. I nearly became the first person to be chucked out of the Royal United Services Institute, because Admiral Barry wrote a long dissertation which I counted 48 mistakes in it. One article of that 3 pages long. And so I wrote to Russi and I said, I want to write a refutation to this. Because he was saying, now that the Afghan war is over, we should now redirect the attention of the Defence Force to fighting climate change. And he's dead serious. I mean, he used to be in Campbell's job. I mean, think of the quality of people we've had leading the military. We've had Morrison, who was known as Hell in High Heels. Yeah. He actually decided to dress up as a bloody woman one day. Then you had Angus Campbell, and you had Barry. So where's and now, of course, the other. Have you seen the travesty of the electric Bushmaster?
No, I haven't, but I'm sure it's terrible.
Well, you can get a picture of it. You can look up the electric Bushmaster. Well, we spent $2.3 million taking the engine out of a Bushmaster and putting in lithium batteries.
Yay.
Now, I don't know if you know about lithium, but if it gets hit, it burns rather well. And so you can skip the intermediate step. There it is.
I have seen that actually.
Yeah. It's silent. Yeah.
Got like a lit up kangaroo at the front, like you want to let everyone know you're there.
Why do they got to put lights on everything that runs on batteries? I don't understand it. Doesn't it use battery power? Sorry, Alistair.
Firstly, they say it's got a range of 300 kilometers. No, it hasn't. But let's say you even have 300. That means you can go out for about 120 kilometers on nice flat roads, and then turn around and come back to the Tesla charging station, which is out in the middle of the Tanami Desert. Of course, as you know, there's plenty out there. And then you sit around for 12 hours with this thing going chug chug chug, filling up, and you ask the enemy not to fight at night or whenever you have to be doing this. Now, lithium burns rather well. You've all seen the Teslas burning beautifully. The good thing about the electric Bushmaster is that when it gets hit by an anti-tank heat round that will actually cause the lithium battery to burn, it cuts out the intermediate step of having to be dead before you're cremated. And I think you should get a rebate because you're going to be cremated before you're dead. And therefore you should get a rebate.
That's horrible, but yes.
It's beyond stupidity that anyone can spend $2.5 million building one of these things and thinking it's actually a good idea. However,
Yes.
that's the level of. In fact, the new chief of the army was his name Stuart, was the guy who actually thought up putting out the money to build this thing. And he was I saw his first interview, and they actually called him an academic soldier. He spent a lot of time studying things, and now he's the chief of the army. And this is one of his ideas. But they actually said to him, well, what are your top priorities? And he said, the safety of my soldiers. Now, that sounds wonderful. If I have to be running some sort of factory, I would think the safety of people might be pretty good. But soldiers live in the danger zone. And in fact, I spent much of my life trying to do things that were unsafe and dangerous.
Dangerous.
Because that's what was fun.
Yeah.
And, I won't tell you how many broken bones I've had by doing things that were seriously stupid. No wonder these guys were laughing at this clown that was doing all these things. But it was joined by lots of other people who were doing it too. Because that's the adventure, that's the thrill, that's the adrenaline we needed. And now he's saying, oh, no, we won't do that. Now, the electric Bushmaster, they've come up with a plan when they've suddenly realised that if you take it away from, say, Ballarat, Bendigo, or Newcastle, and take it out in the bush, it's not going to have a charging unit nearby. So now they're going to supply it with a diesel generator to carry with it.
Oh, jeez.
Now, I've come up. No. I'm now actually going to patent the idea of skipping the batteries and going straight to the generator.
straight to the generator. I reckon.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is the woke BS thing that's been going on that's clouded just common sense. See, the problem is, Alistair, you've got so much common sense that you'd be no good anymore to advise any sort of military or any sort of parliamentary figure or anything like that. And, common sense is just, we need to patent that and see if we can make a mozza on that kind of thing because, we need reliable, strong, capable machines. And batteries aren't there, and they're never going to be. I don't think, especially as you were saying. Like I'm a motorcycle rider, and if you, all it takes is your, you can catch your battery catches fire, and the chassis is made out of magnesium. That thing burns to the ground. You can't put it out. It's the same with lithium.
It's interesting actually because I own a flat in a condo here in Victoria, and a number of the people, the residents there, have asked that we put in battery chargers for their electric vehicles. And I've just resigned from the committee recently because they've gone woke and stupid. But I oppose this on the grounds that the last thing we need is one of these things to burst into flames under a 12-story building with 1,000 people in it.
Yeah.
And no, let them charge them up somewhere else. The other thing is that in the building I've got in Vietnam, there's no Teslas or any of those sort of cars. Now, I have seen a couple of electric vehicles around the place, but mostly people have got little motor scooters, which they take into the garage under the building, which is just solid concrete, and it couldn't burn, I don't think. And they plug them in there and charge them up. And you see these little scooters with the big battery on the back being charged up there. I don't know what the range is, but they're quite popular. But the more of those that get under the building, the more of those that then start to burn down one day, we're going to have a serious problem. Something I might raise when I go back there in May.
And don't forget too, because once one catches, right, they burn so hot that the next one will catch, and the next one will catch, and all of a sudden, like in the building in Victoria where you are, you could have 10 of these things burning up underneath the building, and it will burn the building down because there's not enough water on Earth to put that kind of fire out. They have to submerge them. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, they actually there was a good example of that actually where they covered one of these in foam. It's a Tesla covered it in foam, and the fire went out, and they all started packing up. Poof! It burst into flames again with the foam. So they waved it off.
Yeah.
And they eventually dug a hole and buried it. Put it in a hole.
They filled that hole with water, didn't they? They just had to submerge the damn thing.
Oh, one day somebody will be driving along, there'll be a volcano next to them.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I despair actually at the stupidity, not just of defence, but the whole of Australia and the world that's actually being fooled by things that are this simple. And I actually said, you're not going to believe this, I said to someone who suggested we need more renewable energy. And I said, well, you can get that if only you can get Parliament to repeal the laws of physics. And he seriously came back and said, I don't think we'll do that.
Yeah, they can't do that, right?
No, he said, I don't think they'll do that. I suggested him they should propose to Parliament to repeal the laws of physics. And he came back quite seriously and said, I don't think we'll do that. So I despair, actually. So I think I'll be spending more time living in Vietnam than in Australia.
Well, the weather's probably better there than at the moment. It's freezing here in Sydney.
Tell me about it. I've been frozen since I got back. I mean, we left it until the beginning of November to come back, or mid-November to come back. We came back the 20th of November or something, and it was freezing here. And it got down to 7 degrees one night.
Yep.
And it's still not warm. The temperature here now, it's 16 degrees where I am now. And by the way, that's Glasgow's summer temperature. Ask me again why I don't live in Glasgow.
Yeah. Maybe you got the wrong plane. You just haven't realised yet.
Yeah, maybe you're in Glasgow.